spoken with intensity, pulling the viewer in. Greater than, what would you do if your manager openly told you that you didn't matter, that you could be cut loose like trash at any second? Well, one contractor decided to show exactly how that kind of arrogance can backfire, and trust me, his revenge was as brilliant as it was brutal. If you've ever wanted to see karma hit someone who desperately deserved it, smash that like button, subscribe for more real revenge stories, and buckle up, because this one is going to hit home for anyone who's ever been disrespected at work. I used to work on an engineering contract. Now, if you've ever been a contractor, you already know the deal. You're not permanent, but usually, if you're good at your job, the company keeps extending you. That was the unspoken rule, until my manager decided to make things personal. Our team had about 10 contractors, all reporting to this one smug, full-time employee who loved reminding us of the difference between real employees and temps. His office door was always cracked open, and he'd make these little comments that made you feel like you were disposable. And then one afternoon, he crossed a line. He told me to fire 3 of my own teammates. That's right. Me, a contractor, firing other contractors at 4 p.m. with zero notice. I'll never forget the looks on their faces. Shock, confusion, betrayal. They'd been working hard all day, completely blindsided, and now they had to pack up their desks in silence. It felt wrong. So after the dust settled, I asked my manager, why didn't we give them any notice? Not even a day? He smiled, brightly, almost cheerfully, and said, that's why we hire contractors, so we can cut them loose at a moment's notice whenever we want to. The way he said it, so casual, so smug, it was like a punch in the gut. And the kicker? He said it to me and another contractor sitting right there, basically admitting, yeah, we'll do the same to you too someday, and we won't even blink. You know that feeling when someone underestimates you so badly, it almost burns? That's how it felt. One of my contractor co-workers, let's call him Alex, was a sharp guy. Brilliant, actually. He handled projects so complex that even I couldn't untangle them. If Alex wasn't around, half of our work would have collapsed. But after hearing that smug speech from the boss, something in Alex changed. He didn't rant, he didn't argue, he just got quiet and started planning. Unbeknownst to the boss, Alex had already been interviewing, and soon enough he landed another job. A good one. He didn't tell anyone except me. Meanwhile, he kept right on working. Every morning, showing up on time, every evening, logging off like normal. And all the while, the boss had no clue that his disposable contractor was sitting on the ultimate revenge. It was a Friday, 5 p.m. The office buzzed with keyboards and the hum of fluorescent lights. Everyone was winding down, waiting for the weekend. Then I saw Alex stand up, calm, collected. He picked up his laptop, mouse, and docking station, walked straight to the boss's desk, set them down gently. And with the same cheerful tone the boss once used, Alex said, "Hey, thanks for everything. This is my last day." The boss blinked, confused. "Wait, what do you mean? You're leaving?" Alex just smiled. "Yes, thanks." Then he walked out. No drama, no long speech, just pure, simple, devastating closure. At that exact moment, his official resignation email hit the boss's inbox, sent at 5 o'clock sharp. The boss panicked. See, Alex wasn't just another contractor. He was knee-deep in projects that only he understood. Critical stuff. And now, half done. The phone started ringing. Emails flooded in. But Alex never answered a single one. By Monday, it was chaos. It took the team an entire month just to untangle his unfinished work. Deadlines were missed. Clients were furious. And the boss? He finally realized what it felt like to be left with no notice at all. Karma doesn't always hit fast. But when it does, it hits hard. And speaking of karma, let me tell you about a smaller but equally satisfying revenge that happened around the same time. I had a coworker who kept stealing my pens. At first, I thought maybe I was losing them. But nope. There he was, using the exact same kind of pens I bought. Instead of confronting him, I got clever. I bought a pack of disappearing ink pens and left them on my desk. Sure enough, Mr. Pen Thief borrowed one right before a big meeting. Halfway through, as he proudly took notes, the ink started fading, line by line, word by word, until his page was completely blank. The look on his face? Pure panic. He stared at his notebook like it had betrayed him. Everyone else kept writing, totally oblivious, while I sat there biting my lip to keep from laughing. Needless to say, he never touched my pens again. 2 different situations, 2 different types of revenge. One that made an arrogant boss choke on his own words, and another that made a petty thief think twice before messing with someone else's stuff. In both cases, the message was clear. Disrespect people, and karma will come knocking, sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly, but always when you least expect it. You know, the thing about revenge isn't always the act itself. It's the principle. That moment when someone who treated you like trash finally has to taste their own medicine. And that feeling? That's justice. Greater than, if these stories gave you that little spark of satisfaction, hit that like button, subscribe for more real revenge tales, and tell us in the comments, what's the best revenge you've ever seen in the workplace? I'll be reading every single one. Until next time, remember, karma always collects. After Alex's sudden exit, the office wasn't the same. The boss, who once strutted around like he was untouchable, suddenly looked smaller. He had to answer for the mess Alex left behind. Upper management wanted to know why a key contractor had walked out without notice. And when they dug deeper, the truth came out. His smug, "we can fire contractors at any second" attitude wasn't just careless. It had cost the company time, money, and credibility. For weeks, the team scrambled. Meetings stretched for hours. Everyone was exhausted, cleaning up work that Alex could have wrapped up smoothly if he'd been treated with respect. Instead, the boss had to beg other contractors, people he once dismissed, to stay late and cover the gaps. Ironically, the very people he treated like disposable tools became the ones saving his job. And me? I stayed quiet. I did my work, but inside, I felt this strange mix of satisfaction and relief. It wasn't about revenge for me personally. It was about seeing justice, watching the arrogance drain out of that man's face every time a deadline slipped. Meanwhile, the pen thief never so much as glanced at my desk supplies again. Word spread quickly about what happened in that meeting, the mystery of the vanishing notes. People laughed about it for weeks. And just like that, I went from being the quiet contractor in the corner to the guy who taught a lesson without saying a word. Over time, 2 lessons became crystal clear in that office. Never underestimate the people you think are powerless. Respect is cheap to give, but costly to withhold. The boss eventually lost his authority. He wasn't fired outright, but after the chaos, he was quietly moved to a different role with far less responsibility. Everyone knew it was a demotion, and honestly, it felt like poetic justice. As for Alex, last I heard, he was thriving in his new job, treated with respect, valued for his skills, and no longer working under someone who saw people as disposable. And me? I stayed in contracting for a while longer, but with a different mindset. I realized that revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes it's about letting people trip over their own arrogance. And when that happens, you don't have to lift a finger. The universe does it for you. The weeks turned into months, and the ripples of Alex's exit never really went away. Upper management finally started to realize just how fragile their setup was. They had always treated contractors as if we were interchangeable parts, easy to replace at a moment's notice. But Alex's departure exposed the truth. Behind every contractor was someone carrying knowledge, expertise, and years of experience that no one else could just pick up overnight. Suddenly, policies began to shift. Contractors were given more respect. We weren't offered permanent jobs, of course. That was too much for them. But the way they spoke to us changed. The tone was softer, less dismissive. Instead of threats and smug smiles, the managers started using words like collaboration and partnership. And deep down, we all knew why. The boss who had triggered it all? He never fully recovered his reputation. He became known as the guy who lost Alex. Anytime a project got complicated, people would whisper, "Well, at least we're not dealing with that mess again." His arrogance had branded him, and no one forgot. As for me, I noticed something unexpected. People in the office started treating me differently too. After the disappearing ink prank, co-workers realized I wasn't just some quiet background figure they could push around. I had a sharper edge than they thought. The pen thief? He avoided me completely. In fact, he started bringing extra pens to meetings, almost as if overcompensating for what he'd done. But the real change was internal. Before all this, I used to feel powerless, like I was just a cog in a machine that could be tossed aside at any moment. But watching Alex walk out on his own terms and pulling my own small prank taught me something bigger. Power doesn't always come from a title. It doesn't always come from being permanent or full-time. Sometimes power is simply knowing your worth and acting on it when the moment is right. By the time my contract ended months later, I didn't feel bitter anymore. I felt free. I knew that I wasn't stuck waiting for someone else to decide my fate. I could walk away if I wasn't respected. And when I packed up my desk for the last time, I smiled to myself. Because I knew that somewhere out there, Alex was thriving. The boss had been humbled. The pen thief had learned his lesson. And me? I had learned that the sweetest revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's just walking away stronger, while the people who wronged you are left to face the chaos they created. Months after my contract ended, I found myself looking back on everything that had happened. At first, I thought I'd just move on and forget. But the truth? Those experiences stayed with me, shaping the way I approached every job after that. I carried 2 lessons like armor. Never let someone convince you that you're disposable. Silence can be more powerful than shouting. The funny thing is, word travels fast in certain industries. I didn't realize it at the time, but Alex's dramatic exit became a sort of legend among contractors. Whenever I met new people on projects, they'd whisper stories about that guy who walked out at 5 p.m. sharp and left chaos behind. I'd just smile and nod, knowing I had witnessed it firsthand. And that old boss? Oh, karma kept working on him. A year later, I heard from a friend still at the company. The boss had been passed over for promotions again and again. Apparently, leadership didn't trust him with critical teams anymore. He was stuck in a corner, managing small, unimportant projects. It wasn't an official punishment, but it might as well have been. He had once thrived on control, but now he had none. Meanwhile, the rest of us contractors went on to better opportunities. Alex became a project lead at a new firm, building a team that respected him. I found steady work where my input was valued, and even the little pen thief coworker mellowed out over time. He actually emailed me once, months later, apologizing for borrowing my stuff back then. Maybe he thought I'd prank him again if he didn't make peace. Looking back, the real revenge wasn't just Alex's walkout or my disappearing ink prank. The real revenge was time. Because over time, the truth always shows itself. Respect can't be faked forever. Arrogance always cracks. And those who treat people like they don't matter, they eventually find themselves alone, with no one willing to lift them up when they fall. And me? I don't even feel angry anymore. Instead, I feel grateful, because that chapter taught me that my value doesn't come from a contract, a title, or a boss's opinion. My value comes from me. And once you realize that, nobody can take it away. A few months later, I landed a new contract with a mid-sized tech firm. Compared to my last job, it felt like night and day. The people were friendlier, the projects were exciting, and management, well, let's just say they seemed better. But old habits die hard. I walked in with my guard up. Every time a manager smiled at me, I remembered that smug old boss who had said, "That's why we hire contractors." Every time I left pens on my desk, I half expected someone to pocket them. For a while, things were smooth. I kept my head down, delivered results, and stayed professional. Then, it happened again. A new supervisor joined the company. Let's call him Richard. From day one, Richard had that same air of arrogance I'd seen before. He was loud, dismissive, and made it painfully clear who he thought was important and who wasn't. Permanent employees were the backbone. Contractors like me, support staff. I'll never forget the first team meeting he led. He looked straight at me and another contractor and said with a smirk, "You guys know you're lucky to be here, right? Plenty of contractors out there would kill for this spot." The room went quiet. Everyone shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. Inside, though, I felt a fire spark. I remembered Alex. I remembered the pen thief. I remembered how silence, timing, and patience could turn disrespect into poetic justice. For weeks, Richard strutted around, belittling contractors while praising full-timers. He assigned me the grunt work, even though I had more experience than some of his so-called key employees. But instead of snapping back, I played the long game. I documented everything, every project I handled, every client issue I solved, every late night I stayed to fix mistakes others had missed. I built a quiet, undeniable track record of value. And then the opportunity presented itself. A massive client project was in trouble, deadlines were slipping. The permanent staff Richard favored couldn't keep up. Guess who had the skills to save it? Me. Upper management called an emergency meeting. Richard, trying to save face, started throwing around excuses and half-baked solutions. That's when I calmly spoke up. I laid out the problems, then I laid out the solutions. Step by step, clear, confident, and backed with proof of everything I had been doing behind the scenes. The room went silent. The executives leaned forward. One of them even asked, "Why haven't we heard about this before?" I looked at Richard. His face turned red. He stammered something about delegating responsibilities, but it was too late. The executives had seen the truth. From that day on, everything shifted. Richard's arrogance lost its shine. Management bypassed him and started coming directly to me for project updates. They even extended my contract twice because they didn't want to lose me. The ultimate sting? Richard, who had once dismissed me as lucky to be here, now had to rely on me just to keep his job afloat. Every email he sent me was polite. Every request carefully worded. The power dynamic had flipped completely. And just like Alex, I didn't have to shout or make a scene or get petty. I let the results, the timing, and a little patience deliver the sweetest revenge. By now, I had learned something bigger than just getting even. Revenge doesn't always mean burning someone down. Sometimes it means rising so high that they're forced to look up at you and realize they were wrong all along. Months rolled by, and the project I had saved became one of the company's biggest wins. Clients were thrilled, deadlines were finally met, and the executives were happy. And here's the irony. The man who once treated me like a disposable temp, Richard, was now parading my work as if he had led it all. Every presentation, every meeting, he would carefully phrase things like, "Under my leadership, we accomplished." At first, I laughed it off. I knew the higher-ups recognized my role, but over time, the credit stealing got worse. He started leaving my name out of emails. He called my contributions team efforts, but highlighted his own involvement. That fire I'd felt before started burning again. I thought back to Alex. He had walked away at the perfect moment, leaving chaos behind. Maybe it was my turn to do the same. I didn't just want to leave quietly. I wanted to leave in a way that made Richard choke on his arrogance. So I started planning. I wrapped up my part of the project, but I did it in a way that only I fully understood. The files were complete, the processes documented, but the key details about execution, they were stored in my head. I polished my resume and started looking. Within weeks, I had offers. Better pay, better respect, and, most importantly, managers who valued my skills. I waited. I timed it so that my last day would fall right in the middle of a critical handoff, one Richard had been bragging about to the executives. On my final day, I walked into the office like it was any other morning. Richard didn't even look up. He was too busy prepping slides for a big presentation. At 5 p.m. sharp, I walked over to his desk. Calm, collected, just like Alex had done before. "Hey, Richard," I said with a smile. "Thanks for everything. Today's my last day." He froze. "Wait, what?" "Last day. You didn't give notice." I shrugged. "That's the beauty of contracting, right? You can let us go anytime. And we can walk away anytime." I watched the color drain from his face. The words he had once used to belittle me had just come back to bite him. Hard. At the exact same moment, I hit send on my resignation email, CCing the executives. I didn't rant. I didn't insult. I simply thanked them for the opportunity, explained I was moving on, and left my contact details in case of emergencies. And then I walked out. The following week, I heard from a friend inside the company. Apparently, Richard had been humiliated. The executives were furious that he hadn't seen this coming, especially after he'd been bragging about his leadership. The project stalled. Meetings devolved into panic. And Richard? He got chewed out in front of everyone. Just like my old boss before him, his arrogance had caught up with him. As I settled into my new job, I realized something. Revenge isn't just about making someone suffer. It's about reclaiming your power. Alex showed me that walking away at the right moment can be the ultimate payback. I had seen it with my own eyes, and now I had lived it. Richard will probably never forget the day his disposable contractor left him high and dry. And me? I'll never forget the lesson. Respect isn't optional. Arrogance always collapses. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply knowing when to walk away. Leaving Richard's company was like shedding a heavy weight. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to remind me how replaceable I supposedly was. But something inside me had changed. I realized I didn't want to keep bouncing from contract to contract, always at the mercy of arrogant managers who thought they owned me. I wanted control. I wanted freedom. I wanted to prove that people like me, the so-called disposable contractors, could thrive on our own terms. So I made a decision. I was going to build something of my own. At first it was terrifying. I had savings, but not much. I had skills, but starting a business felt like a whole different beast. Still, I remembered all the chaos I had survived. If I could handle arrogant bosses, stolen pens, last-minute firings, and projects collapsing around me, I could handle this too. I reached out to contacts I'd made over the years, former coworkers, managers who had respected me, even clients who remembered the projects I'd saved. Slowly, the work trickled in. Freelance gigs turned into steady contracts. Steady contracts turned into repeat clients. And before I knew it, I wasn't just surviving. I was running my own small consulting firm. The real kicker? A year later, I got an email from a familiar name. Richard's company. They were in trouble again. Another major project was failing, and someone had recommended me as the person who could fix it. I read the email twice, then laughed out loud. The same man who once told me I was lucky to be here was now reaching out because he was desperate for my help. This time, the power was completely mine. I didn't respond right away. I let the email sit in my inbox for a few days. Finally, I sent a short, professional reply, greater than, "Thank you for reaching out. Unfortunately, my firm is currently booked for the next several months. I wish you the best of luck with your project. No anger, no insults, just silence. The most powerful revenge of all." That was the moment I realized I had won. Not just against Richard, not just against my old boss, but against every person who ever tried to convince me I didn't matter. I wasn't disposable. I wasn't replaceable. I was indispensable. And now I was in charge. And you know what? That victory felt better than any prank, any walkout, any single act of revenge. Because it wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. In the end, revenge can take many forms. Sometimes it's a quiet walkout that leaves chaos behind. Sometimes it's a pen trick that teaches a thief a lesson. And sometimes it's building a life so successful that the people who once looked down on you have no choice but to look up. And that, I realized, was the ultimate revenge. Living free, respected, and completely on my own terms. Years passed, and my little consulting firm grew stronger than I ever imagined. What started as me taking odd freelance jobs turned into a team of dedicated, loyal people, professionals who knew what it felt like to be undervalued and who swore never to repeat the same toxic cycle. We weren't just doing projects. We were building reputations. Slowly but surely, our firm started winning contracts that once belonged to the very companies that had discarded us like trash. And then, the day of full circle revenge finally arrived. One of the biggest contracts in the industry opened up for bidding. A multi-million-dollar project that every major company wanted. And yes, Richard's old company was one of the bidders. When we walked into the boardroom for the final presentation, I almost laughed. Sitting across the table was Richard himself, looking older, more desperate, and far less confident than I remembered. His arrogance was gone, replaced by the nervous smile of a man who knew he had something to lose. The decision-makers listened carefully to each pitch. Richard's team went first, throwing around flashy slides and buzzwords. But when it was my turn, I didn't just talk about numbers or technology. I told a story. I spoke about teamwork, trust, and how respect builds stronger projects than fear ever could. When I finished, the room was silent. Then came the applause. The contract? Awarded to us. Richard wouldn't even look at me as I walked past him. His face was pale, his hands trembling. For the first time, he was the disposable one. That's when it hit me. I didn't even need to say a word. Revenge didn't come in the form of shouting, insults, or pranks this time. Revenge came in the form of success, respect, and the undeniable truth that the tables had finally, completely turned. As I stood outside that boardroom, I realized something important. Revenge might start with anger, but the ultimate form of it isn't destruction, it's transformation. It's proving to yourself and to the world that no matter who tried to tear you down, you rose higher than they ever thought possible. And that day, I walked away, not as a contractor, not as someone disposable, but as a leader who had written his own destiny. The old bosses and arrogant coworkers, they became nothing more than footnotes in my story, because in the end, the greatest revenge is living a life they could only dream of.